Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk about Ukraine again today. I don't really want to because I wish this wasn't happening. I wish we could talk about what's happening in the UK and try to put our country back together, which has been devastated by so many things over the last 25 to 30 years, cultural Marxism and climate alarmism, and then the COVID communism that's come in over the last 2 years and tried to destroy our nation under the guise of Build Back Better. Not just our nation, the UK, but around the world. This whole mantra of Build Back Better is nothing of the sort. What it is about is destroying everything and then building a slave system where people will not have cash. They'll have central bank digital currency. They won't have freedom and free speech anymore. Everything you say will be controlled by a social credit system. And this is the kind of hellish world that these people envision for our future. Well, I don't envision that. And that's why I've been in the freedom movement for 2 years from the very beginning, because I could see at the beginning of the whole sort of lockdown narrative and everything that came after that, this was just the beginning of what we now know to be mass formation psychosis. And it's a new phrase to me we didn't have 2 years ago, but that's what was happening. And most people were hypnotized by it, and they fell under the spell of the propaganda that was coming out. It was very, very powerful propaganda, and anyone who diverted and diverged from the mainstream and government narrative was smeared immediately as a granny killer or sort of a conspiracy theorist, something like that. The same thing is happening over Ukraine now. So there's been massive pushback on the lockdown agenda and that sort of COVID agenda, and in England, especially not the other parts of the UK, but they're coming along. In England, things are pretty much back to normal now. It's all sort of finished for now. But so what's happened is that the globalists have stirred up a war, and the war it's been coming because for 8 years the Ukrainian army and defense force, which includes a lot of neo-Nazi battalions like the Azov battalion, have been shelling ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine, and they stationed a lot of the Ukrainian army in the east. So the vast majority of the Ukrainian army defense force are actually stationed right next to the Donbass area, where they were shelling Russians. And you get the narrative and reporting from the Western mainstream media, which as always is a pack of lies and it's propaganda. And most of it comes directly from Zelensky and the Ukrainian government. Now, he's just shut down most of the independent Ukrainian press, and I think it's 11 opposition political parties have just been suspended in Ukraine. So that's no longer a democracy with freedom of speech and a free press, alike the mainstream media here in the West are pretending it is. So this guy Zelensky, the Nazi-supporting Jewish Ukrainian president, I don't know how that works, but he's an actor, and he's going around the world, to the UK, to Canada, to the USA, to Israel, to other countries, to ask them to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which would bring NATO forces into direct contact with Russian forces. And he's asking for weaponry to be supplied by NATO, which essentially means that NATO is already fighting a proxy war, because the idiots at the top of NATO have been funding and supporting the neo-Nazi battalions for 8 years, and now they're bringing and putting in more and more weapons into Ukraine. So they're getting NATO countries involved in this conflagration. Now, this would be the easiest thing to stop if people just grew up like adults and said, we got a big problem here. If we continue to escalate this, we're going to end up with World War III. And there are some psychos who actually want World War III. And you know, some of them are beyond psychos. They are into certain religious beliefs. Well, I wouldn't call it a religion, if you like. I'll say no more there, but I think if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Some people actually want to wipe out life on the planet, or at least whatever small amount of life is left, they want it to be as miserable and hellish as possible. Well, that's not what I want for the future, and I don't think that's what many people want for the future. So it took 2 years with the lockdown situation to wake up the normies. We haven't got 2 years this time. So we've got to stick our heads above the parapet now and start speaking out about this and start challenging the mainstream narrative, whatever it takes. Because when the masses of people speak, we are more than the small cabal that is trying to use this situation to escalate things into a world war, which we don't want. So if we pray and if we speak out, we can stop World War III from happening. Now, I don't care much for the Russian regime. That's authoritarian. They went into Kazakhstan and put down a people's rebellion against the New World Order there last year. Putin is into Agenda 21, he's into Agenda 2030, he's into the Fourth Industrial Revolution. But I do think he's a Russian patriot, and he will support the Russian people. So I think he's conflicted in, number one, supporting the New World Order, but also seeing how it's affecting Russian people, ethnic people in the Donbass, and he wants to stop them from being killed by the Nazis as he sees it. And Russians have a very different view of history to what we do in the West. They don't see the Second World War as we do. They call it the Great Patriotic War. 20 million Russians died fighting the Nazis. So, you know, the leader of Russia isn't going to think anything of sacrificing 20,000 Russian lives to defeat Nazis in Ukraine today. It's a completely different way of looking at it. Now, I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that that is what is. Okay, so we have to take the world as it is, not how it's presented to us by the pathetic, liberal, lovey mainstream media in the West, who will always just use situations to stir up tensions and undermine everything they possibly can, but dress it up as though they care, with a banner of virtue signalling underneath it. So that's where we are. So I went on the Freedom Rally on Saturday in London. There were over 150 freedom rallies around the world. And you know what? The flags that were there, mostly being waved, were Canadian flags to support the Canadian truckers who had stood up against the narrative. Didn't see any Ukrainian flags like a lot of the people putting them in their bios. Didn't see any Russian flags either at all, because people understand what's going on is not what is being presented to us on the mainstream media. So, you know, I'll probably get a lot of stick for this by people who are pushing the narrative and saying, oh, you don't care, you want people to die. No, I don't want people to die. That's why I'm saying this, because what NATO countries have got to do is just get out of the way, stop supplying weapons, don't implement a no-fly zone, don't get involved, and this thing will just burn itself out. But we're being given all kinds of propaganda from the Ukrainian government saying, oh, Putin has killed this many people, Putin's killed that many people, isn't he a terrible war criminal? When a lot of the things going on are actually the neo-Nazis killing people as well. But that's not being presented to us. And it's really difficult to know exactly what the truth is. So there you go. Stay strong, everybody, but this is a time to speak out, not follow the narrative, and to avoid at all costs this escalating into World War III. We've got a beautiful world that God's given us. Let's keep it that way.